shit. He said what?
Did Buckingham Palace or Prince William set a trap for Prince Harry and Meghan Markle? And were they gullible enough to fall into it?
Again, I have to be careful what I say, but that I won't be able to show, my children.
It started on a quiet evening in Montecito. No cameras, no red carpets, no scripted interviews, just the Sussexes at home. Yet what happened that night soon leaked through staff whispers, ultimately erupting into shocking headlines that left even seasoned royal observers astonished.
I thought your analysis of this book was spot on. You've called Harry despicable for trying to trash the royal family's reputation and dragging them below even what the Kardashians would get up to. So from an American perspective, do you think he has succeeded in damaging the monarchy, or is the biggest damage actually to the brand of himself?
Insiders say the disagreement began quietly. Harry and Meghan were in the kitchen, speaking softly at first, debating schedules, commitments, and the constant media scrutiny surrounding them. But within minutes, the conversation escalated. Harry's voice became pleading, while Meghan sharpened. Their argument echoed through the hallways, audible even to staff below. One aide later reflected, "We've heard them bicker before, but this felt different." It was intense, even frightening. And then something occurred that no one could have imagined.
Without question to himself and Meghan, I think that Americans were split 50-50 maybe a couple of months ago when it came to Harry and Meghan. But the problem is that they can't close their mouths and they just keep talking, and it seems more and more petty.
As Archie wandered into the room, clutching a toy, Meghan, in the midst of her tirade, suddenly grabbed him by the arm. Witnesses called the motion sharp and startling. Archie flinched, visibly upset, while Harry froze, his face pale. For a brief moment, silence fell, broken only by Archie's quiet whimper. Then Harry's voice pierced the tension. "Meghan, stop. Please don't do this." The room seemed to hold its breath in that moment.
I was early on this. When Meghan and Harry were still in the royal family and living at Frogmore, I wrote an open statement on Twitter, which you can go back and look, that she was going to end up back in the United States and in Los Angeles because I just saw her coming. She's a D-list actress, and all she's ever wanted to do was be invited to A-list events. And she's been a social climber from the beginning. She married somebody the first time to socially climb. And for her, Harry was just an entry ticket into all of those circles. Unfortunately, she found someone. She's not very intelligent. She's not very talented. Nobody in America was watching Suits. She was an actress that was living in Canada. And fortunately for her, and credit to her, she found someone that is dumber than her. And that's the truth, is that Harry's just not a very smart.
Harry's words weren't merely desperate. They were pleading. Staff outside later said they had never heard him sound like that, his voice quivering with a mix of fear and anger. What unfolded next was raw and volatile. Palace insiders, hearing the account afterward, admitted privately that it had ceased being an argument. It had become a family unraveling, breaking apart right before their eyes.
And just a reminder, every deleted tweet, fake statement, and PR cover-up takes hours to piece together. If you want to help this channel keep going, hit that join button and become a member. We'll keep exposing.
The moment Meghan's hand closed around Archie's arm, the atmosphere in the room shifted. What had started as an argument between words had transformed into something raw and terrifying, making even experienced palace aides uneasy. Harry moved forward immediately, hands raised, his voice breaking with desperation. "Meghan, please. He's just a child. Let him go. Please don't involve him in this." But Meghan didn't release him. Instead, she pulled Archie closer, jaw tight, expression blazing with anger. An insider later recalled the tension. She hissed through clenched teeth, "Don't tell me what I can and can't do with my own son." Those words cut through the room like a blade. Harry froze, caught between anger and fear, and tried again, softer this time, his voice trembling. "He doesn't understand, Meghan. He doesn't deserve this. Please, let him go." Archie's wide, frightened eyes darted between his parents. His toy slipped from his hand, hitting the marble floor with a sharp clatter that echoed like a gunshot in the sudden silence. Down the hallway, two staff members passing with trays stopped. They weren't supposed to interfere or even acknowledge the argument, but later admitted they froze, terrified, listening to Harry's voice, shaking with fear. One whispered afterward, It wasn't the shouting that shook me. It was Harry's pleading. He sounded broken. Then came the sound that shattered the room entirely. Archie's small, frightened cry. According to aides, it was that noise, the unmistakable sound of a child terrified, that broke Harry completely. His voice cracked as he shouted, "Stop, Meghan. You're scaring him." For one unbearable moment, Meghan's grip did not relent. Then, finally, she released him, pushing Archie gently but firmly into Harry's arms. Archie stumbled, pressing his face into his father's chest. Meghan turned sharply away, shoulders heaving, breathing ragged. Silence descended, heavy and suffocating, making it clear to everyone present that this was not just a marital dispute. It was a fracture, a rupture that could no longer be hidden. Harry sank to the floor with Archie clutched tightly against him, rocking instinctively as the boy's muffled sobs pressed against his chest. "It's okay. Daddy's here. You're safe. You're safe," he whispered repeatedly, each word cracking under the weight of his own fear and heartbreak. To any witness, it was the image of a man torn apart, not only by his wife's actions, but by the realization that his son had been drawn into the center of their conflict. Meghan, meanwhile, turned on her heel and stormed out of the kitchen. Her footsteps were sharp, echoing down the hall with intent and fury. Staff who glimpsed her described her expression as hard and unyielding, her jaw clenched painfully. She didn't look back, didn't slow, disappearing into her private study. The door slammed so forcefully that a picture frame rattled to the floor, leaving a tangible mark of her anger in the silent house. For those who had witnessed the episode, the room remained heavy long after she left. Harry continued to hold Archie, whispering reassurances, rocking him gently while the child gradually calmed. The staff remained frozen, grappling with the intensity of the scene and the shocking realization that the household, once a place of routine, had been split open by fear, desperation, and conflict, exposing the fragility of even the most guarded family moments. The silence Meghan left in her wake was unbearable. Two aides who had been frozen outside the kitchen exchanged terrified glances. They knew the unspoken rule. Domestic matters were off-limits, not theirs to intervene in. But what they had just witnessed felt different, dangerous. One whispered to the other, "We need to write this down. For Archie's sake." That night, according to palace insiders, a quiet, unofficial memo began circulating among Harry and Meghan's household staff. It wasn't a formal report. It consisted of handwritten notes, fragments of overheard conversations, and timestamps marking the moments of escalation. At the top of one page, a chilling line was scribbled. Archie pulled into argument. Harry begged her to stop. Those words, stark and simple, would eventually reach journalists, turning a private, painful family moment into an international scandal. But within the Sussex home, the immediate fallout was tangible. Hours later, when Meghan finally emerged from her study, her face flushed, her voice low and icy, she offered no apology. She didn't acknowledge what had happened. Instead, she looked directly at Harry, still sitting on the floor with Archie asleep in his arms, and delivered one line that left him speechless. "If you think they won't use this against us, you're wrong." In that moment, Harry realized Meghan's concern wasn't for Archie, it was for optics. That realization marked the true beginning of the story's spiral. By morning, the house was eerily quiet. Archie had been taken outside to play with his nanny, shielded from the tension that lingered like a heavy fog. But Harry hadn't slept. He sat at the kitchen table, bloodshot eyes staring at a half-drunk cup of tea left cold hours ago. When Meghan entered, she offered no greeting, no inquiry about Archie. She placed her phone on the counter with a thud and said in a clipped, deliberate tone, "We need to get ahead of this." Harry, still raw from the previous night, asked hoarsely, "Ahead of what?" "What happened last night?" Meghan's response was low, deliberate. "Don't think the staff won't talk. They always talk." Harry's jaw tightened. "You're worried about leaks?" "Meghan, our son was terrified. He was crying. And you." He broke off, unable to finish the thought. Meghan's expression hardened, her focus on the screen of her phone as she scrolled through messages. Do you have any idea what the palace will do if they hear about this first? They'll spin it, Harry. They'll make me into a monster. They'll make Archie a pawn. I won't let them. Harry slammed his hand against the table, startling her. This isn't about the palace. It's about us. About Archie. He's not a story to control. He's our child. For the first time, Meghan faltered, her voice rising defensively. Everything is a story, Harry. Don't you understand? That's what our lives are now. If I don't shape the narrative, they will. And once they do, we'll never get it back. Staff who overheard fragments of this exchange later said they felt physically sick. One aide whispered, "She wasn't talking about protecting Archie. She was talking about protecting herself." That morning, Meghan reportedly made 3 phone calls. One to a trusted PR strategist in Los Angeles, another to a sympathetic journalist, and a third to a Hollywood fixer she had relied on during past crises. Her instructions were identical. Control the story before it controls me. For Harry, the shift was unbearable. He retreated upstairs, clutching Archie, whispering promises no child should have to hear. Daddy won't let you be part of this. Not ever again. And yet, the tragedy was that it was already too late. Meghan's calls had set in motion a chain of leaks and counter-leaks that would drag the private conflict from Montecito into the global spotlight. By midweek, the whispers had already escaped the confines of the estate. What began as hurried notes scrawled by nervous staff evolved into a circulating web of speculation. Conversations that were meant to remain private were now fodder for gossip, each retelling intensifying the story. Harry's anguish deepened with every passing hour. The home that had once offered refuge now felt like a cage, each room echoing with the memories of the previous night's confrontation. Archie remained in Harry's arms, a small, frightened presence who had been thrust into the center of a grown-up battle he could not understand. Every sound, every movement in the house reminded Harry of the previous night's escalation, the flinch of Archie, Meghan's glare, the cold snap in her voice, the echoing thud of the door as she stormed off. The staff, many of whom had witnessed or overheard the scene, felt the weight of what had occurred. They were caught between discretion and conscience, writing fragments, creating records that could not be unseen. The memo, though unofficial, became a time-stamped archive of fear, desperation, and fractured trust. By the end of the week, Montecito had become a pressure cooker, the private anguish of one family spilling outward, unstoppable. What had begun as an argument between Harry and Meghan had transformed into a saga of public and private stakes colliding. Harry's heart remained heavy, the echoes of the previous night lingering in every corner of the house, and the realization settled cold and relentless. Some fractures, once exposed, can never truly be mended. The story from Montecito quickly became fodder for Fleet Street reporters. The first headline appeared in a small gossip column, almost buried: Montecito meltdown, Sussex row over child shock staff. Within hours, however, the story spread like wildfire. Larger tabloids picked it up, embellishing it with lurid details. Anonymous sources close to the household described a heated argument, a terrified Archie, and Harry's voice breaking as he begged Meghan to stop. One particularly damning line attributed to a staffer splashed across front pages in London: "Please, Meghan, you're scaring him. We've never heard him sound like that before." Social media exploded. The hashtag Archie wrote trended on Twitter. Memes juxtaposing Meghan's stern expression with crying toddlers circulated on Instagram. Even late-night comedians weighed in, joking about royal Hollywood parenting. But beneath the humor, the undertone was dark. Pundits debated whether Meghan had crossed a line, not just as a duchess, but as a mother. While American outlets framed it as a tense family moment, the British press was merciless. Harry, meanwhile, was devastated. Friends say he slammed his laptop shut when he saw the headlines, face pale, hands shaking. He reportedly shouted into the empty room, "She turned our son into a headline. Our son." When he confronted Meghan, she was unyielding. Standing in the doorway, arms crossed, she said simply, better my version than theirs. But the version she referred to was no longer about protection. Even as she tried to control the story through her allies, another leak slipped through, one that didn't originate from her camp. A UK broadcaster claimed to have obtained a staff memo detailing the incident. The shouting, the arm-grabbing, Harry's desperate pleas. And, crucially, the memo wasn't written by palace insiders. It came from Meghan and Harry's own Montecito staff. The private fight had been handed, almost willingly, to the media, back in London. The fallout was impossible to ignore. What had initially been dismissed as tabloid exaggeration landed on Buckingham Palace's polished oak desks. By morning, both Charles and William had been briefed. Sources say the reaction was immediate and furious. Charles reportedly gripped his pen so tightly during the briefing that the ink blotted across the page. His voice, low but seething, reportedly carried across the room. This was never supposed to touch the children. Not ever. William's response was even sharper. Pacing the length of the drawing room, fists clenched, he turned to the staffer delivering the report. "You're telling me she dragged Archie into this?" That Harry begged her to stop. When the aide nodded, William snapped. "Then it's gone too far. This isn't family drama anymore. This is dangerous." Behind closed doors, the palace began discussing the unthinkable. Intervention, not political, but personal. Senior advisors floated the idea that Harry and Meghan's household was spiraling into chaos, and discreet, firm oversight might be necessary to protect Archie and Lilibet. One phrase appeared repeatedly in the briefing notes. If household instability continues, the implication was clear. The safety and well-being of the children had become a matter of urgent concern, and immediate measures might need to be taken to prevent further escalation. In Montecito. Meanwhile, the Sussex household continued under a shadow. Meghan remained focused on controlling the narrative, while Harry struggled with the knowledge that a private, painful family incident had become a global story overnight. Every word, every leak, every headline magnified the tension that had started with a single argument, leaving both the family and their staff caught between fear, loyalty, and the relentless glare of public scrutiny. Guardianship considerations were quietly raised, whispered among senior palace advisors. The idea was explosive, almost a constitutional grenade, but it was discussed in hushed tones, the gravity of the possibility hanging heavy. Meanwhile, Meghan was moving ahead of the storm. Sources claimed she already suspected the palace would weaponize the staff memo against her. That very night, she placed another call, not to a PR strategist this time, but to a Los Angeles lawyer known for handling high-profile celebrity custody battles. Insiders say her words were deliberate, cold. "If they come for me through my children, I'll make sure Harry knows who's really pulling the strings." What Meghan didn't anticipate was that she wasn't the only one gathering evidence. Among her own staff in Montecito, a small faction had already begun speaking in whispers. Not to her, not to Harry, but to journalists. What they were about to reveal would thrust the Sussexes into a darker spotlight than either had ever imagined. The staff memo, it turned out, was only the beginning. Within days, fragments of information from inside the household were arriving in inboxes of journalists across the UK and US. Initially, it was minor details. Meghan shouting at staff over missed schedules, Harry pacing late at night, Archie clinging to his nanny for comfort more than to either parent. But the leaks quickly sharpened. One anonymous aide described a disturbing pattern. Whenever arguments erupted, Archie would wander into the room. Instead of stopping, Meghan would pull him closer, as if to make a point. It wasn't discipline, it was performance. And Harry would beg her every time to stop. Another insider claimed Meghan meticulously kept files, notes, and even recordings of household disputes, many involving Harry. According to this source, the documentation wasn't for reflection, it was leverage. She knew precisely how to use it if circumstances turned against her. The most damning testimony came from a nanny who had quietly left the household earlier that year. In a confidential statement later leaked to the press, she said, "There were nights when Archie cried himself to sleep after their rows. Harry tried, but he looked powerless. We were told to say nothing, hear nothing, but I couldn't anymore. It was wrong. These accounts painted more than a picture of a fractured home. They lit the fuse of public outrage. British tabloids went on the offensive, publishing brutal spreads with headlines like, "Staff breaks silence," "Archie trapped in Sussex crossfire," "Household in turmoil, child at the center of chaos." Even once sympathetic American outlets began to hedge. On primetime broadcasts, commentators questioned, at what cost is Meghan fighting this war? Harry, meanwhile, was crumbling. Friends told reporters he was haunted by the thought that Archie's childhood was being weaponized, replayed in the press like a reality show gone wrong. One confidant recalled Harry breaking down during a private call, his voice barely audible. "They're not protecting him. Not Meghan. Not the palace. No one is. I begged her to stop, and now the whole world knows." But Meghan was unshaken. If anything, the whistleblowers made her dig in deeper. That same night, she told a close associate, words later leaked, "If they think I'll let staff write the story of my family, they've underestimated me. I'll tell it myself, and I'll make sure the world listens." With that, Meghan began orchestrating her next move, determined to control the narrative, confident that every call, every message, every contact could shape public perception. By the time the story reached international media, Meghan's response to the leaks was swift and strategic, a narrative-shaping counterstrike that left both the palace and Harry blindsided. She didn't retreat. She advanced. 2 days later, she arrived at a children's charity in Los Angeles, photographed smiling and polished, wearing a soft pastel dress that exuded innocence. But it wasn't her wardrobe that drew attention, it was her words. Standing before a bank of cameras, she placed a hand over her heart and spoke in a measured, trembling voice. "As a mother, my only duty is to protect my children, and I will never apologize for that." The statement was rehearsed and deliberate, and it worked. Clips spread across American morning shows, hosts praising her composure and courage in the face of constant attacks. Social media erupted with hashtags like #ProtectMeghan and #MotherFirst. But in London, the response was far colder. Palace aides recognized it for what it was, a carefully orchestrated counterstrike, designed to erase the impact of staff testimonies and replace them with a curated victim narrative. Behind palace doors, William reportedly scoffed at the footage. Protect her children? She dragged Archie into the argument herself. She isn't protecting him. She's performing. Charles's anger was quieter, but no less dangerous. One aide recalled him muttering under his breath, "She's turned motherhood into a weapon." What made Meghan's performance even more consequential was how it undermined Harry. While Meghan appeared calm and composed in public, the narrative of Harry's desperation, his begging, tears, and collapse into Archie's arms, painted him as weak, unstable, and even incapable of managing his own household. Harry knew it. A close friend said he watched Meghan's speech from Montecito, Archie perched on his lap. When it ended, he whispered to his son, "She made it about her, not you. She always does." Meghan wasn't finished. That same evening, she reportedly called her media allies again, instructing them to push a new angle. Palace insiders were orchestrating leaks to smear her as a mother. By dawn, sympathetic headlines began appearing in select outlets. Is Meghan the real victim of a palace smear campaign? Sussex children caught in royal power play. The narrative shift was bold, and for part of the world, it worked. But inside Buckingham Palace, it sparked something darker. Advisors began whispering a word never before linked to a royal mother: unfit. If that language entered public discourse, Meghan's staged appearance could appear less as courage and more as a cover-up. That night in Montecito, the atmosphere was suffocating. Harry sat alone in the living room, the TV replaying clips of Meghan's charity appearance, Archie resting quietly in his lap, and the weight of the public and private battles pressing down like never before. The gap between perception and reality, the curated image versus the household chaos, was now impossible to ignore. Every headline, every soundbite framed Meghan as the noble mother fighting to protect her children. But to Harry, it was unbearable. He slammed the remote against the couch, voice cracking, muttering to himself, "That wasn't for Archie. That was for you." When Meghan returned, calm and composed after her day in front of cameras, Harry could no longer contain himself. He rose, trembling with anger. "Do you have any idea what that looked like? Do you have any idea what you've done to me?" To him, Meghan crossed her arms, unfazed. "I protected us. I did what had to be done." Harry's voice broke. "Protected us? You dragged Archie into that fight. You held him while you shouted at me. And then you stood in front of the world and pretended you're the victim." For the first time, Meghan's composure cracked. Her voice sharpened, icy and defiant. "If I don't tell the story, Harry, they will. And when they do, they'll paint me worse than anything you can imagine. I won't let them erase me. Not again." Harry shook his head, running his hands through his hair, breathing uneven. "This isn't about being erased. This is about Archie.
He's not a headline.
He's not a shield. He's our son. And you don't even see him anymore. You see leverage." Witnesses said the room fell silent, the words hanging heavy like a blade. Meghan's eyes narrowed, but she didn't respond. Instead, she turned and walked upstairs, her footsteps deliberate, echoing like a warning. Left alone, Harry slumped into a chair, face buried in his hands. A staffer later confided they heard him whisper into the empty room, "I begged her to stop, but she never hears me." And that was when the palace whispers, staff leaks, and Meghan's public defiance collided into one terrifying reality. Harry was no longer just a son caught between worlds. He was a father caught in a war inside his own home, and he was losing. Upstairs, Meghan paced her study. Her phone glowed with unanswered texts from PR allies, sympathetic journalists, even a Hollywood fixer. She scrolled furiously, mind racing. One message she typed but never sent read, "If they want war, I'll give them war. And I'll win." Across the Atlantic, Buckingham Palace was not idle. Behind thick oak doors, senior advisors huddled with Charles and William, speaking in guarded tones. The staff leaks, the Montecito memo, Meghan's public performance, all were being tallied, weighed, and assessed. One advisor finally broke the silence, the words chilling the room. "The question is no longer if she's destabilizing the family. The question is whether the children are safe." William reportedly muttered grimly, "If she'll use Archie in an argument, she'll use him for anything. We can't pretend anymore." Charles, pale and heavy with the weight of the crown, remained silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his directive was cold and unyielding. Prepare options. What those options entailed, no one outside palace walls knew. Insiders whispered of legal teams, guardianship clauses, and contingency plans never discussed publicly before. Back in Montecito, Harry held Archie as the boy slept against his chest, whispering promises he no longer believed he could keep. "I won't let them take you from me. I won't." As dawn broke, both Harry and Meghan stood on the edge of forces neither could control. The fight had left the walls of their home. It was no longer simply a family feud. It had become a battle of narratives, of safety, of power. And with whispers of palace intervention growing louder by the hour, the world was left asking the inevitable question: had Meghan and Harry's war finally reached the point of no return?